Muy bien, buenos días, doctora. Bueno, buenos días a todos. Para nosotros es un gran placer inaugurar nuestro primer curso de verano aquí en la sede Caribe de los posgrados en epidemiología con un grupo de altísimo nivel que viene de Brasil. Se hace un esfuerzo muy grande apoyado por nuestra decana, por supuesto, para que los estudiantes que están sobre todo en Bogotá puedan conocer la sede Caribe y para que podamos expandir nuestra red de colaboradores aquí en la costa Caribe de Colombia. Entonces vamos a hacer este primer curso. Es un curso sobre equidad en salud, que es uno de los temas más relevantes en este momento en salud global y en epidemiología. Quisimos traer entonces a nuestros expertos del Centro Internacional para la Equidad en Salud, que es un centro colaborador de la OMS y tiene expertos renombrados a nivel internacional. Entonces, para mí es un gran placer presentarles hoy al profesor Fernando Obermeister. Él es quien va a ser nuestro coordinador del curso durante toda la semana. Fernando es epidemiólogo, por supuesto, es licenciado en fisioterapia, tiene una maestría en salud pública, un doctorado y un postdoctorado en epidemiología de la Universidad Federal de Pelotas en Brasil, uno de los centros más importantes en todas las Américas para estudiar epidemiología en el mundo y en la región. Actualmente es profesor del Departamento de Medicina Social de esta misma universidad y es uno de los investigadores senior del Centro Internacional para la Equidad en Salud. También tenemos a la profesora Luisa Arroyave. Luisa es colombiana, estamos también muy orgullosos de ella. Es graduada en Información de Sistemas de Salud de la Universidad de Antioquia, tiene varias maestrías y actualmente hizo su doctorado y está haciendo su postdoc en el Centro Internacional para la Equidad en Salud en Pelotas. Luisa también va a estar siendo profesora de este curso. Y para fortalecer nuestras redes también tenemos a la profesora Beatriz Caicedo, ella es epidemióloga de este mismo programa en Brasil y es directora de investigación de la Facultad de Salud Pública de la Universidad de Antioquia. Entonces tenemos un equipo realmente de talla global en términos de epidemiología y este tema. Lamentablemente el profesor Aloisio Barros tuvo una calamidad y no va a poder unirse a nuestro curso, pero con el equipo que tenemos aquí de profesores, ustedes van a estar en las mejores manos para aprender sobre este tema. Entonces, no siendo más, quiero agradecerles a todos su apoyo también en su participación. Es muy importante impulsar este tipo de iniciativas en la sede Caribe y en nuestros posgrados en epidemiología. Entonces, bienvenidos a todos. Y le doy la palabra a nuestra decana, la doctora Natalia Mejía, para que haga la inauguración del curso y posteriormente al profesor Juan José Yepes, coordinador de los posgrados.
Muchas gracias, profesora Andrea. Pues así como tú lo dijiste, contamos con la experticia del profesor Bergmeister y la profesora Arroyave. Tenemos también en esta primera sesión que pretende mostrar los resultados en salud materno-infantil, comentaristas que son propios nuestros de nuestra universidad y de nuestro programa, como el profesor Luis Jorge Hernández, como la profesora Mónica Pinilla y la profesora Catalina González. Y pues para mí, como tú lo recalcar, la importancia de hacer eventos en nuestra sede Caribe y regionalizar de alguna manera el conocimiento y no quedarnos centralizados. Así que bienvenidos para todos y que sea un curso muy provechoso esta semana para todos ustedes.
Muchas gracias, doctora Natalia. También el profesor Juan José Yepes.
Bueno, muy buenos días a todos, decana, profesora Andrea, los conferencistas que nos acompañan hoy. Para nosotros, desde la Universidad de los Andes y más concretamente desde la Facultad de Medicina y dentro de nuestros posgrados de epidemiología, es un placer tener la fortuna de poder contribuir a la educación de nuestro país con este curso de verano. Creemos que el tópico es ahora más que nunca de mucha relevancia, no solamente para nuestro país, sino también para nuestra región. Esperamos que todos los estudiantes y profesores que nos acompañen a lo largo de este curso de esta semana, bueno, podamos aprender de ustedes, de los expertos. Así que muchas gracias y de nuevo bienvenidos a este su curso.
Muchas gracias, Juan José. Bueno, antes de darle la palabra al profesor Fernando, quiero agradecer muy especialmente a Juliana González, nuestra coordinadora de educación continuada. Juli creyó en este proyecto y lo logramos, entonces realmente hoy es un día muy importante. Bueno, muchas gracias y Fernando, bienvenido.
Buenos días, ¿me escuchan?
Sí se escucha, profesor, adelante.
Gracias. Para nosotros es un gran placer estar acá hablando con ustedes. Yo voy a pedir excusas porque mi español es muy malo, entonces yo voy a cambiar para el inglés para la presentación, pero las discusiones son, podemos hablar el portuñol, porque mi español es muy malo, no es posible para hacer todo esto. Entonces, agradecer primero a Andrea por la invitación. Este curso era para acontecer antes de la pandemia, pero nosotros estamos acá 2 años después. Entonces, nos sentimos mucho honrados en hacer parte de esto, con toda la estructura que la universidad ofrece, y muy felices que podemos participar de la capacitación de nuevos pesquisadores, estudiantes y todo esto. Entonces, ahora yo voy a cambiar para el inglés, que es mejor para mí. Okay, the idea of this opening session is to present to you the importances of monitoring equity in health, especially in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals. And for this, we, as a group, started in 2009 with Cesar Victora and Aloysio Barros, two that most prominent epidemiologists in Brazil and in the world. And then we started this in 2009, this group, a small group, of course. And then we started to analyze equity using surveys, using secondary data from low and middle income countries mainly. But all the things started in 2003 with a group that commit themselves to do a series of meetings each 2 years to take to understand and to monitor the progress in preventing child death. It started with mortality in child, but then it became more broad, and then we included also coverage intervention, and this group also wants to be accountable or all the information that we have on there. And this started in 2003 with this paper here in this series on child survival with Cesar Victor. And all the things started that. And then in 2005, this group comprises the countdown to 2015, a series of health goals based on the Millennium Development Goals. And every 2 years, they produce a huge report with lots of countries, with lots of information on several health indicators, including mortality, coverage, prevalence of stunting or other diseases. And then this series of reports, these are PDF reports you can scan with the QR code here. And this comprises a lot of universities around the world. And our group have a central role on data analysis and equity analysis for producing these reports. And this is the main signature of the countdown. This countdown have a 2-page report for each country. For I don't remember how many countries in the 2000 up to 2015, but we have a lot of information, and we can see progresses here. For example, in mortality, if the country is on track to achieve the goals on mortality, on under 5 mortality, and on maternal mortality, and also lots of demographics, interventions, child health, and so on. And in the beginning, the equity was only this part of the profile. Only this was related to equity. All the information there are aggregated, not disaggregated by some dimensions. And so few interventions, and you will see this a lot this week. This is called Equiplots, showing the coverage on lots of interventions on the poorest 20% and the richest 20%. And this was the equity part in the countdown profile. With the new development goals in 2015, the development goals to be achieved up to 2013, we have a new design of each of the goals, and then one of these goals are the most important. For example, is the goal 17, especially the 17.18, because these partnerships for the goals comprises also the capacity building to support countries to increase significantly the availability of high quality, timely, and reliable data. And most important, disaggregated by income, gender, age, race, ethnicity, migratory status, disability, geographic location, and other characteristics relevant in national context. For example, some characteristics in Colombia could be important, more important in Colombia than in Brazil, for example. And then this is especially needed to have data to analyze everything that is happening in the country. So now I will talk about a little bit about our group. The International Center for Equity in Health was the beginning. It was central, although we have a small part in the report, in the countdown to 2015, and become more central in the countdown to 2030. And all the work, not all the work, but the main work we do is to produce a stratified estimated with the standard errors, with confidence intervals, with comparables and the standardized indicators. And at that time, in 2005, 2010, we have a limited set of stratified results available to analyze it, to understand. And then in 2009, we started developing a platform based in Staten to analyze surveys in a kind of batch mode, to analyze several surveys at the same time and so on. The other point is standardized definitions for all the indicators that we produce, and also to include any kind of standard error to understand the variability between the estimates. And then this started with a very small group working with this data. And this was the first team. We don't have the faces of the first team, but Cesar was the coordinator of the group. And then Aloysio was the chief analyst. And then we have 3 epidemiologists and statisticians that were related to, were responsible to create the codes and so on, to analyze everything. Giovanni is in the Ministry of Health of Brazil. João Luiz is a professor at Federal University of Santa Catarina, and Maria Clara is now living on the Netherlands or Bristol, I don't remember. And Andrea is a colleague of ours that was responsible, not this Andrea, it was 2 other Andrea. She was responsible for data preparation, reports, site contents. And we have Fatima. Fatima is a fantastic person that performed literature review, is a bibliotechnician. And Leonardo, that started as IT support and site design, and then Leonardo became more important in our group over the time. And then in 2016, we started to have the faces of the people. And we have here Cesar, Aloysio, myself, Maria Clara, this is from Peru, Janaína, that will be with us online in the afternoon, Giovanni and all the groups. And we start to grow up. We have more, we started with 15 people. Now we are, in 2017, we are around 20 people. And then 23 in 2019. And in 2020, we have the most heterogeneous group, because we have people in this year from Colombia, from Mexico, from Haiti, from United States, and so on. We have from Guatemala as well. And we have, most of them are Brazilians, but we have people from most part of Latin America. And this group is quite the same in 2021. 2022, the year did not finish yet. And then we will have in the end of the year the new face of the group. So these are the three main actions that we have. We call this a mega database, but we are a kind of optimistic about that because someone say that big mega database is something that your personal computer cannot open. So, but we call it this mega database, include a lot of low and middle income countries, and that use or that we seek for national health service, mainly demographic and health service and multiple indicator cluster surveys. We have some non-standardized surveys in Ecuador and other countries that we are analyzing. So we produce this database, as Andrea mentioned in the beginning, to feed the health equity assessment toolkit and health equity monitor. That is a WHO tool to monitor progresses in inequality in maternal and reproductive and neonatal and child health. And this is our mega database. And the dissemination to monitoring and to have a kind of accountability to countries and for those who ask support from us. In the past year, we offer some online courses to some countries that are partner from Countdown, for example, Ivory Coast or Côte d'Ivoire, West Africa country. We offer a workshop for them online to do that. And in the past 2 weeks, I was in Nairobi in Kenya to another workshop with the Countdown group. And the main strength of our group is to do science. To do science is to analyze patterns and trends of inequalities, the main determinants of the inequalities, and a kind of forecasting is also in our main objectives of the group. So I will tell you a little bit about the process that can be, you can find, this is easy. No, this is not easy. This compresses a lot of time of our time doing the analysis and performing and comparing and trying to have a very good estimate to do that. As mentioned, the main goal is to produce a standard estimated, stratified by some health dimensions, some inequality dimensions, not health dimensions, such as child sex, area of residence, region, maternal age and schooling, wealth, and another more stratifications that we are trying to look for to understand better all the process in the countries and in the low and middle income countries. The first phase of this data analysis is the preparation. Preparations comprise identify, download new surveys if they are available or not. With the pandemic, we are facing now not too much surveys coming out now, and we are more slow now. Then we do a standardization of all the data sets with the names, with all the things, check variables. This is important to check if any indicator is possible or not possible to be calculated, and then list the relevant variables and codes, and put these things in a stata data set that we call control data set. This is all the information in a stata control in columns and lines and so on, and to work on this. And then we run the stata code. It's a huge stata code. In fact, it's not a huge. We started with a huge stata code, and then we separate in different codes to produce these estimates, to produce also the composite estimates that we will talk a little bit about this morning, and also to produce equity measures mainly based in the wealth distribution. And then after the analysis, we do a verification. This step of verification is to catch some error in questionnaires, the way of the data were collected, and so on. We check against the report. That is important. The report say, DPT3 coverage is around 90%. So we need to have a number around that. So if we don't have this will be complicated. And then we do a kind of verification of trends. If the indicator is increasing over time, and then in a year it's increasing from 70 to 90, and in the 5 years later is 4%. This is wrong. We need to check, and we need to do all the things on that. And then after all the things, we send the data to the WHO to put in the health equity monitor and the health equity assessment toolkit, and then is disseminating the results. And also you can download all the data that we have there. So why I told we have a mega database? We have 121 countries included in our database, and with 435 surveys, with lots of estimates on there. Counting every woman, every child, we have around 6 million women and 4 million children in the data set. So it's not a mega database you can open in your computer. Depending on your computer, it will be slow or not, but it's possible to open in the computer. So these databases are semi-processed with the standard definitions, equity stratification, lots of them, summary equity indices, standard errors. As I told you, double check against the reports, against all the trends and so on. And the most important, we are able, if everything runs smooth, we are able to run, for example, 100 surveys, 200 surveys in 1 day. So this is the most important thing, except India. India is a survey with a lot of information. It's very hard to have this. But if we don't count India, then we can run 100 and 200 surveys in 1 day and a half. It's fast in the process as well. So we will talk much in detail on this during this week, but we have main stratifiers, the wealth quintiles, urban and rural residents. We have a double disaggregation or intersectionality between urban and rural and wealth quintiles, woman's age. We have education of the mother, of education of the woman, sex of the child. Some variables are not stratified by sex because it doesn't make sense to stratify by sex. The region of the country, usually the admin level 1, like departamentos, like states or regions of the country that the country consider like as this. And we also have the woman's empowerment that only for DHS surveys that comprises 3 dimensions of social independence, decision making, and the other I forget, sorry. And the 3 dimensions of women's empowerment, and we use this as a stratifier as well. And we have some outcomes, special intervention coverage in reproductive, maternal, neonatal, and child health. Lots of these indicators. Here we have the combined indicators that Luisa will talk to you later in this morning, child mortality, fertility, and we have also measures of wealth inequality. So this is a brief presentation of the equiplot. This was designed by Aloysio Barros, our colleague that was supposed to be here, but unfortunately he can't make it for now. And the way Aloysio did this graph is to show how inequality is performing over time, or how inequality is compared between countries, and so on. And in this graph, each dot represents a group. In this case as well, quintiles, the darker dot is the poorest quintile, and the gold dot is the richest quintile. So this presentation will be available for you, right? But if you want to scan the QR codes here, we can do equiplots in this data and also in interactive equiplots in our website. So in this graph, it's interesting because if you see what is happening in Brazil in contraceptive use, you can see from 1986, we have a huge inequality represented by the distance between the groups, and this inequality decreases over time. Everyone has access to contraceptive methods in Brazil. That is nice because we have a universal system, we have all the things on that, and we are reducing inequalities and increasing the coverage. This is important. So this, Luis, also will talk up to you later. This is the composite coverage index, why this was created, or was proposed by Tis Borma in 2008 as coverage gap. But this was how much we need to achieve 100% of coverage. This was not well understood by policymakers and so on, and that we use as the coverage. This is the formula. Luisa will talk to you much more, but this comprises 4 phases of the continuum of care: the family planning, maternal and newborn care, immunization, and treatment of sick children. So this is an index that can summarize the reproductive, maternal, neonatal, and child health in the country. It's not a single indicator. Luisa will talk a little bit about this, the advantages to use summary measures of coverage on this sense. This is also an equiplot. You can see now we are comparing countries. You can see, for example, Burundi has the small inequality, and Nigeria has the biggest inequality in the CCI because the gap is much more higher. And one other important thing when you see this is, for example, the rich, the yellow dots here, are quite the same. We have some variations between the countries, but are quite the same, over at least 60%. And for the poor, we have coverage of 60% and 20% in the country. So this is important to see and to see all these things on that. This is the, sorry, this is the super survey-based empowerment, women's empowerment, that was proposed by Fernanda Everling, was a colleague of us that is living in Canada now. And she proposed this indicator based on information. For example, if is beating not justified, if wife goes out without telling husband of, or if, this is crazy, beating not justified if wife burns the food. So in some countries, they ask it, this is, it's completely crazy, I agree, but it happens in some countries. And we have, with this analysis, this proposal of Fernanda, we have 3 main domains: the attitude to violence, autonomy, and decision-making. And this we use all as, this super is interesting because we use the super as an indicator and as a stratifier. So it's very nice to see this. And important is measured at individual level. In the score Z's, of course, in Z scores, sorry. And this is possible to see at individual level if a woman is more empowered or not more empowered than the others. Here is an analysis that we use the super against the 0 doses of DPT, which means children receiving no DPT, as the main objective is to have 3 doses of pentavalent or DPT vaccine. And this is only one domain of the super, the social independence domain. And in most countries, children of less empowered women present higher prevalence of 0 DPT. This is nice. We have 0 DPT, children receiving at least 1 dose of DPT in more empowered women. And 7 countries with a gap, a huge gap. Nigeria, Angola, Pakistan, these countries have a huge gap here between children receiving not any doses of DPT. We have here, Luisa proposed this indicator. This is a antenatal care qualified indicator that comprises not only the number of visits, but also the content, the content of the antenatal care, and gives some points for this of what is done in the antenatal care. For example, if the blood pressure was measured, if blood sample was collected, and so on. And 0 points represents without an ANC, that a woman that doesn't have a contact with an ANC visit, and 10 points is the best antenatal care here. And this is to show you that we are not able, but we don't need to look at indicators measured as yes or no. Received 4 visits of antenatal care, received contraceptive, or so on. We can use a score, like Luisa put this on the paper, and we can see difference between the scores. The scores are different between the countries. Rwanda, for example, in 2014 has the lowest difference. Eswatini also has the lowest difference on that. And Angola has the biggest difference between the scores of this. This is what I mentioned to you before, the Health Equity Monitor. You can see this data, but we also produce data for UNICEF, UNFPA, IAP, WHO Nutrition, Global Strategy, and another partners that we have in the International Center of Equity in Health. These are some example of papers that we are related. We try to do specific country-specific papers like country case studies, but we try to do a more broad vision of the inequalities over the world, especially in low and middle income countries. So with the SDGs, we have a call for new measures of new equity dimensions. And we started to play and to propose and to see another different stratifications. For example, wealth deciles. Wealth deciles is instead divided by 5, we divided the wealth distribution by 10. And then we have the 10% poor and the 10% rich and so on. And we can see much bigger inequalities on that. For example, if you go to Bangladesh here, the 10% richest are much better than the second better people. So we have a huge gap between the rich people. And this is interesting to see. The same case of Colombia, your country. We have a huge gap between the poorest. For example, the 10% poorest doesn't achieve 80% of coverage of skilled birth attendant. So it's something is wrong, but the others are doing pretty well. The other 9 groups are doing pretty well. But why these 10% poor are not achieving the neither 80% of coverage of skilled birth attendant? So we need to look on this. We need to look on this disaggregation more. And this is the paper. Okay, if you can scan this, this is the paper that we explore this kind of information. This is crazy graph, right? This is a crazy graph, but very interesting graph, because people always say for us, okay, wealth quintiles are not comparable between countries because you are using a relative position of inequality and so on. Okay, let's try to solve this limitation. And then what we did, we propose to incorporate income for each quintile of the distribution. So we have income, absolute income. We can compare income between countries. And this is interesting. I'll took the graph is a confusion sometimes. What this graph means, we include, in this case, we include the income for each quintile of the distribution. And then all this information are here. These in red are the underperformer countries according to the mean. And these in green are the best performer according to the mean. So, but when you see in the x-axis, the annual household income in $1,000, this is in the log scale, you can see very, very different coverage in the same level of income. For example, when you look at this, around $1,300 of income, we have in Malawi, Lesotho, coverage ranging from 70 to 75%. So it's fine. But in Central African Republic, this is around 23%. And in South Sudan is 10%. So in the same level of income, we have a wide variation of the coverage. This means why these countries here perform better than these countries here. So policies what explain these differences. And when you see the richest, these differences are not too big. When you look at the income around $50,000, higher than $50,000 a year. So it's not so different. We have a gap, but the gap is small. So this is important to see these differences, to see this is an advantage of including absolute income on this comparison. We have some challenges, and we are trying to advance on these challenges because sometimes we need, for example, analyze ethnic groups. Ethnic groups is very hard to get the information on this. Why? Sometimes ethnic groups are putting in the account of the poverty. For example, indigenous or Black people in Brazil are putting in the account of the poverty. They are considered poor, and then we are going to this. And we are not collecting very well this information in Brazil. We have a standardized information but based on the skin color in Brazil, according to the Brazilian Institute of Geography and Statistics. So we have white, Pardo, Black people, indigenous people, and yellow people, and others that don't classify themselves as any kind of this classification. And in some contexts are very hard to evaluate. For example, Nigeria, they collect information on ethnic groups, but do you know how many ethnic groups Nigeria have in the survey? 250. So how you will analyze data on 250 groups? It's impossible sometimes, but also it's impossible to group this 250 categorization of the variable. How this group is similar to this or not, and so on. One important information for Colombia is essential is migration. We have few data, not too many data on complete information on that, because in most of the times we don't have the reason of the migration. What it means, we don't have if this migration is forced or was because job opportunity, a good job opportunity to go there, and we don't know about that. So this is important to evaluate, and we don't have too many surveys using this. And also geography, especially for policymakers, they love to see where are the unattended or the people that are not getting the coverage or someone. And this is becoming more important as geospatial coding are being included in DHS and big surveys. So it's possible to perform geospatial models to calculate this. And I will show some examples on that. So going further on ethnic groups, we have information on ethnic groups. Around 3/4 of surveys have any kind of information, but the information is very different in each survey. For example, in Nigeria, they count ethnic groups. In Brazil, they count skin color. For example, this is the skin color and so on. In other countries, they have a language to define the migration. What is the mother tongue? For example, they use this as a migration as well. But for example, in Dominican Republic, they ask in the survey if the person speaks Spanish or Creole. Creole is the language from Haiti. So then we can see a kind of migration there and so on, or even ethnic groups there. And as I told you, some countries in Africa region includes a lot of ethnic groups. 250 in Nigeria is too much, but we try to do that in paper only on Latin America to separate people or to separate in 3 different groups. Indigenous, there is an E more there. Afro-descendants and other groups. The other is the reference group that we call like European or some people that don't classify themselves as indigenous or Afro-descendants. And this is one of the graphs of the paper is showing as well skilled birth attendant or skilled attendant at birth by indigenous people, Afros, and reference group. And even this is a kind of to put together a lot of ethnic groups, but this allows you to see that indigenous are systematically with lower coverage levels. Indigenous are in all countries. Indigenous has the lower levels of coverage, especially, for example, in Ecuador, in Guyana, in Colombia, Brazil, in all the countries we have this this pattern, and this is systematic. And in most of the countries, Afro-descendants are below the reference group, but not Not for all countries, but in most of them they are. And this is important. Even if we put together some categories in the reference group, this is important to show that indigenous and also the Afro-descendants are leaving behind on this intervention. Migration is a little bit hard because often we are trying to do the nationality. People say in countries for the East Asia, in the north of the Africa, they ask the nationality of the individual, but we don't know the reason of the migration. So this is hard to get. If we don't have the information on the reason of migration, you cannot assign that this is migration made by, for example, in Turkey, it's Turkey, yeah, Turkey that, or even other countries, Ukraine now with the war are migrating to other countries by forced reasons, not, it was not a choice of the individual. And we have in all these 435 surveys, we have only 6 with detailed data, including origin and reason for migration. And Colombia is here, right? Colombia has lots of information on migration. That is an important issue for the country. And for geography. Geography, as I mentioned in the first minutes of my presentation, surveys usually are sampled to represent administrative level 1, like states and so on. But even I will give you an example of Brazil. Brazil have only 5 regions. Each region is probably bigger than most of the countries in South America. So it's a lot of variation inside these regions. Oh, states is fine. States is fine. We can use these states as well. But we can also use finer stratification like districts. Peru, for example, has districts in the surveys. And this huge region, high inequalities, is something like I try to say, oh, Brazil is going well on increase the coverage of the use of contraceptive or decrease the stunting prevalence and so on. And then DHS started to include geocoding of the census tracts in the surveys. But they put a kind of error to try to anonymize the census tracts and the households. And this is an error. It's a kind of 2 kilometers error for each household to not find the household in that code. But this doesn't prejudice or this doesn't harm the analysis of geospatial special models on that. And this is the Peru, the CCI that I mentioned before. This is done with the admin level 1, the first level of disaggregation. And this is done with the geospatial analysis modeling. And this is interesting because you can see in the coast, we have higher coverage rates in the coast of CCI, but when you go to in Peru, they call selva in the Amazon, and then we have lower coverage here. So it's important to see this. It's important to show this and where to act. Even in the coast, we have some yellow parts here. For example, not the same coverage of the coastal provinces or districts in Peru. So it's important to see all this information here. So, concluding, and this is nice because sometimes people say, we already know everything about inequalities. Yes, it's not completely false disinformation, but we need to understand the inequity definition.
¿Tú tienes mi llave de acá?
Hola, Georgia. Entonces, empecé a hablar en español. The inequity definition that Janaína will bring to you this afternoon is that are inequalities that are unjust, socially produced, and preventable. We need to think about this. And we need to know what is happening. If we don't know what is happening in our country, and we need this with data. Sorry, modeling is nice, but it's not real data. We need data to analyze this, to show the policymakers here, we have this scenario, we need to act here to reduce inequalities, to increase coverage, to reduce stunting or something that we are interested in. And the inequality analysis reveal essential aspects to design and updating policies, which really aim to leaving no one behind. This is the main theme, is leaving no one behind. Nadie se queda para atrás en español. So that's it. This is the course presentation. This is what we do. This is what we will be sharing with you all this week. Will be a hard week for you. Sorry to told you this, but will be very nice and we will have fun. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Fernando. Muy interesante y creo que es una excelente introducción para el curso que vamos a estar tomando esta semana. Entonces, quisiera invitar a nuestros profesores de la Facultad de Medicina, la profesora Mónica Pinilla y Luis Jorge Hernández, a hacer unos breves comentarios sobre la presentación de Fernando, ya que ustedes tienen bastante experiencia en el tema también. Mónica, ¿está por ahí?
Hola, buenos días. Hola, Fernando, ¿cómo estás? Bueno, buenos días. Una envidia, ustedes con ese calorcito tan rico y uno acá aguantando frío en Bogotá. Juan José, ¿por qué no me invitaste? O sea,
Todo
André,
mal, todo mal.
esto es una falla de todo. Bueno, bueno, pues muchísimas gracias, Fernando. Es un placer para mí pues estar aquí dando los comentarios sobre este tema. También muy interesante ver todos los papers y todas las cosas que ustedes han hecho desde el Centro de Equidad y que los estudiantes de la maestría y la especialización en epidemiología pues puedan aprender todas estas técnicas. Dentro del análisis de los factores socioeconómicos y de todas las desigualdades que se presentan en salud, es muy importante poder medirlas. Muchas veces lo que vemos, y justamente ayer estaba en una conferencia y me decían, ay, pero pues es que ¿por qué no se mide? Porque salud o cosas relacionadas con salud no tenemos más información. Y la cosa es que hay muy pocas encuestas o hay muy pocos datos y los datos que tenemos pues en muchas medidas no se utilizan. Entonces ver por lo menos estos centros de investigación en donde ustedes le sacan todo el juguito a esos datos se vuelve genial. Yo abro un paréntesis, yo empecé a hablar en español. ¿En español está bien, André? ¿O sí?
Está bien. Yo puedo comprender, pero no hablar.
Okay, perfecto.
Fernando ya hizo un curso, un crash course en español estos últimos 2 días, entonces se entiende perfecto. No tan rápido,
perfecto.
pero sí dale en español.
Listo. Listo, entonces es muy importante tener este tipo de centros de investigación que generen esta capacidad de datos y utilicen especialmente las encuestas que son armonizadas, como son la encuesta de demografía y salud y las encuestas tipo mix para toda la parte de información de la salud de los niños, niñas y adolescentes alrededor del mundo. Nosotros acá en Colombia pues sufrimos muchas desigualdades, estoy segura que de pronto Luis Jorge nos va a hablar un poco de eso. Sufrimos desigualdades en el acceso a servicios de salud, en los resultados de salud. Cada vez que trabajamos con datos administrativos o con datos que nos muestran por lo menos las prevalencias de enfermedades crónicas o enfermedades transmitidas por vectores, o que también nos muestran la cobertura de cosas como vacunación, o que nos muestran, digamos, la distribución, ya que tenemos a COVID que apenas estamos terminando, nos muestran la distribución de cómo se dio la mortalidad y la morbilidad por COVID, pues lo que vemos es que hay unas grandes inequidades y que la población con unos niveles socioeconómicos más bajos es la población que generalmente se ve más afectada, no solamente porque sufren las peores condiciones, sino que porque sus condiciones ya de base los hacen muchísimo más propensos a que sufran esas enfermedades. Entonces hay como una inequidad en ambos sentidos, o sea, eres más propenso a que te dé, pero si te da eres también más propenso a que te den las peores condiciones o en las peores formas. Entonces el estudio de inequidad lo que nos hace y nos llama la atención es a poder reconocer estas diferencias, y lo importante es darle información a los hacedores de política para que se rompan estos ciclos que en general siempre nos van a llevar a la población a aumentar sus niveles de pobreza, a que ellos tengan unos niveles de discapacidad o de morbimortalidad mucho más altos. Y los hacedores de política en realidad necesitan esta información para poder hacer estas decisiones y poder reestructurar los sistemas y garantizar el adecuado acceso a bienes y servicios en salud. Entonces, tener esta información y tener estas características y poder en realidad trabajar con índices de inequidad de diferente tipo, pues se vuelve una herramienta fundamental para todo epidemiólogo, especialmente para los epidemiólogos sociales, porque eso les abre un mundo de posibilidades y de análisis de esos determinantes sociales que en este contexto se vuelven tan importantes. Entonces, pues muchísimas gracias Fernando y todo el equipo. Muchas gracias Andrea por traerlos aquí, por darle la oportunidad a nuestros estudiantes de aprender de los expertos y pues bienvenidos. Espero que Cartagena los trate muy bien.
Gracias, Moni. ¿El profesor Luis Jorge?
Gracias, Andrea. ¿Ahí me escuchas? Sí.
Sí.
Andrea, ¿ahí escuchas? Sí.
Sí, sí.
Muchas gracias.
Sí.
Agradecer a la profesora Andrea, felicitarla por este importantísimo evento que organizan la sede Caribe, la profesora Andrea Ramírez. Bienvenido al profesor Fernando y los profesores invitados, a nuestros estudiantes y egresados que nos escuchan en este importante evento. Coincide con lo que decía la profesora Mónica. Quiero resaltar solo 3, 4 cosas de lo que decía el profesor Fernando, comenzando por el final, cuando él retomaba un poco la definición de Margaret Whitfield, que dice las inequidades son esas diferenciales injustos e innecesarios. El profesor Fernando, para mí, 2 mensajes grandes y un tercero que insinuó. Primero, la forma, es decir, es importante, y lo decía Mónica, hacer este tipo de estudios multicéntricos, con esas 3 fases que él bien señala, de preparación, de análisis, de verificación, estudios multicéntricos de país, como incluyeron 121 países, 435 estratos, la necesidad de estratificar, la necesidad de mirar más allá. Él dice en una de las diapositivas que parece muy diciente, huge region, high inequities, regiones muy grandes esconden inequidades, que es la falacia ecológica. Hay que desagregar. ¿Y cómo desagregan, cómo estratifican? Por sexo, por edad, por educación de la madre, por ubicación geográfica. Y cómo se aproximan a ese análisis, digamos, de independencia social, de actitudes frente a la violencia y de toma de decisiones en la mujer, por ejemplo, la edad con la pareja, las decisiones de fertilidad, la cobertura de servicios de salud. Es decir, cómo hay un acercamiento a la autonomía cognitiva, funcional, la autonomía socioeconómica, la autonomía política de las personas también. Cómo medir esas inequidades y desagregar la información me parece clave. Otro mensaje clave del profesor Fernando me parece cuando habla de esa falacia ecológica, tomo ese término, y es cómo, por ejemplo, en los países, a medida que aumentan el ingreso, pues mejora el acceso a los servicios, pero aún así hay diferenciales adentro. Aún así, obviamente el ingreso, hay que ver esos diferenciales. Llama la atención cómo hace la comparación entre Bangladesh y Colombia. El 10% más rico de Bangladesh pues tiene mejores servicios y el 10% más pobre de Colombia tiene más. ¿Cómo nos parecemos en eso los países? La necesidad de estratificar, de segregar, de desagregar información. Finalmente diría de lo que afirma el profesor Fernando y retomando lo que dice otro brasilero notable, que es Naumar Almeida Filo, cuando ve los datos y dice, los epidemiólogos muestran las inequidades, pero nos ha faltado avanzar más y es explicar las inequidades, corregirlas. El profesor Fernando señala bien cómo, por ejemplo, para los tomadores de decisión, en una de las diapositivas mostraba cómo los tomadores de decisión a veces no entienden estos indicadores complejos, la necesidad de indicadores compuestos que combinen varios índices de cobertura, de calidad de vida, y a veces llevar esto a la toma de decisiones es tan difícil. Entonces, esto sirve para monitorear políticas públicas definitivamente. Y de pronto un paso más allá, profesor Fernando, sería tratar de corregir estas inequidades, no solo mostrarlas en nuestra región, en África, en Latinoamérica, sino cómo corregirlas, cómo disminuir estas inequidades en servicios de salud. Usted lo mostraba bien. Por ejemplo, la tasa de fecundidad en adolescentes sigue siendo más alta en zonas, en población afrocolombiana, en población indígena. La mortalidad materna en Colombia supera los 200 casos por 100.000 en mujeres indígenas, en comunidad guayú, en la Orinoquía. Igual ocurre en Brasil. Usted lo mostró en la diapositiva como las comunidades indígenas son más rezagadas, mostró el caso de Ecuador también. Eso es importante, pero viene el mensaje final que me parece que el profesor Fernando lo insinúa también. Las causantes de estas inequidades no es la condición social, es decir, la condición social es un reflejo que está pasando, no es por ser negro, no es por ser indígena, no es por ser mujer. Esto esconde unas estructuras de poder de territorio, unas estructuras que es necesario develar y corregir y que se están manifestando en los negros, en los indígenas, en la población más pobre, en las mujeres. Entonces me parece muy clave esto que está haciendo el profesor Fernando, que Colombia esté en estos estudios, que la profesora Andrea, que la profesora Mónica, que los estudiantes se animen a esto, y me parece que es un abrebocas a este curso de primera mano. Muchas gracias, profesora Andrea, y gracias, profesor Fernando.
Muchas gracias, profesor Luis Jorge. La profesora Beatriz.
Gracias, Andrea, y gracias, Fernando, por esta presentación. Yo realmente quedo muy complacida, muy motivada por este abrebocas, como dice el profesor Jorge, para este curso, de conocer el contenido de lo que vamos a estar aprendiendo en esta semana. Estos análisis de comparación entre países, que es completamente viable que nosotros lo podamos realizar a nivel subnacional, comparando nuestras regiones, comparando nuestros departamentos, nuestros municipios. Entonces, realmente, qué gran motivación el saber que vamos a aprender con calidad a analizar tantos datos que tenemos disponibles, que aunque a veces podamos decir que son pocos o imperfectos, creo que son herramientas con las que podemos generar información que dan indicios de cómo puede estar Colombia. Entonces, maravilloso los artículos que presentaste, que es muy interesante nosotros ver cómo estamos como Colombia comparado con otros países con condiciones socioeconómicas muy similares, y compararnos y ver si estamos muy atrás, si estamos muy adelante, o si realmente es que tenemos que trabajar, pero me dejas muy motivada en cuanto a cómo podemos nosotros replicar esos análisis a nivel subnacional. Así que me encanta la estrategia del curso, que no es solamente ver, sino que es también hacer. Estaremos así súper juiciosos con las prácticas. Hubo un mensaje para mí muy importante, y lo decía Mónica, dice: como epidemiólogos tenemos que garantizar la calidad en el manejo de los datos. Entonces, todo ese proceso que ustedes hacen en el Centro de Equidad en cuanto a la preparación de los datos, los análisis, la verificación, lo importante de la divulgación, que no nos quedemos en gráficos muy bonitos, pero que nadie entiende, o que ni siquiera el que los hace sabe comunicar qué es lo que esos gráficos están diciendo. Entonces, creo que es muy importante nosotros lograr aprender a cómo analizar información que luego pueda ser utilizada para la acción, para la toma de decisiones, cómo llegar a esos espacios de tomas de decisiones. Entonces, gracias por darnos estos ejemplos, la manera como los analizas, la claridad. Es realmente un ejemplo para que nosotros también incorporemos eso en nuestros análisis diarios. Hay muchas inequidades, y como tú lo decías en una de las diapositivas, muchos dicen que ya sabemos todo sobre inequidades, y a veces uno siente que es una retórica que no falta en las presentaciones, la desigualdad, ¿no? Bueno, pero cuando se necesita la acción, entonces es muy importante aprender cómo cómo interpretar para realmente hacer o formular políticas o programas o proequidad orientadas a disminuir esas brechas sobre diferencias en salud entre las personas o diferencias en salud entre los territorios. Entonces, aquí es generar información que realmente ayude a los tomadores de decisiones a que logremos reducir en el tiempo estas diferencias. Quedo pues muy complacida y muy motivada. Muchísimas gracias.
Gracias, profesora Beatriz. Bueno, entonces muchas gracias a todas las personas que se conectaron, a nuestros profesores y a nuestra decana, les agradecemos su participación. Vamos entonces a dar por cerrada nuestra sesión inaugural del curso, entonces mil gracias a todos por conectarse y también cerramos nuestro Facebook Live. Hasta luego, muchas gracias.
Nos vemos pronto.